You make me feel my age, Nola said, her voice carrying that particular blend of exhaustion and accusation I'd grown to recognize. She stood in our kitchen doorway, water bottle in one hand, car keys in the other, ready for another cycling class with her new fitness obsession. I looked up from my laptop where I was debugging code for the Henderson project. At 41, I suppose I did represent something she wanted to escape from. The gray at my temples had multiplied over the past year, and my metabolism had surrendered to gravity in ways that 27-year-old cycling instructors probably couldn't relate to. Sorry about that, I said, keeping my tone neutral. I'll try to age backwards next time. She didn't laugh. Nola used to find my sarcasm charming. These days, it just seemed to irritate her further. That's not what I mean, Rowan. She shifted the water bottle to her other hand. It's just, everything feels so routine, so predictable. I need something that makes me feel alive again. The cycling classes had started 3 months ago. At first, I'd been supportive. Nola worked in HR consulting, spending most of her day mediating office disputes and reviewing policy manuals. If spinning bikes and loud music helped her decompress, that seemed healthy enough. But lately, the classes had multiplied. Monday, Wednesday, Friday had become Monday through Friday, with weekend sessions thrown in for good measure. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from her cycling group chat. She'd developed an entirely new vocabulary around cadence, resistance, and recovery rides. Have fun, I said, returning to my screen. Try not to feel too alive. She paused at the door. Linda thinks I should take up rock climbing too. There's this great gym downtown. Linda Marsh was Nola's closest friend and primary enabler. Linda had divorced her husband 2 years ago and seemed determined to convince every married woman in her orbit that liberation lay just one dramatic life change away. Rock climbing sounds expensive, I said. Not everything is about money, Rowan. No, but most things are about time, and you're spending a lot of yours at that cycling studio. Nola's jaw tightened. I'm trying to better myself. I thought you'd support that. I do support it. I'm just wondering when I get to see you again. You see me every day. I see you rushing to leave for class or coming home exhausted from class or texting about class. That's not the same thing. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her choosing between escalation and avoidance. Avoidance won. We'll talk later, she said, and left. The house felt different after she drove away. Quieter, but not in a peaceful way. More like the silence after an argument that hasn't happened yet. I finished the Henderson project around 7 and started dinner. Nola usually got home by 8 on class nights, though recently that had stretched to 8:30, then 9. Tonight she walked in at 9:45. Sorry, she said, not sounding particularly sorry. We went for smoothies after class. We? The group. Linda, Jessica, that new guy Kai who teaches the advanced sessions. Kai. This was the first time she'd mentioned a specific instructor by name. How was the smoothie? Good. Kai recommended this protein blend that's supposed to help with recovery. She moved around the kitchen with nervous energy, putting away her water bottle, checking her phone, avoiding eye contact. I made pasta, I said. It's in the fridge if you want to heat some up. I'm not really hungry. The smoothie was pretty filling. I watched her scroll through her phone while standing at the counter. Her face had that particular glow people get when they're reading something that makes them happy. It had been a while since I'd seen that expression directed at anything involving me. Nola? Are we okay? She looked up, and for a second, her expression softened. We're fine, Rowan. I'm just going through something right now, trying to figure out who I am outside of work and routine. And I represent routine? You represent safety, stability, all the things I've always wanted. She paused. But lately I want to feel something else too. The conversation felt like standing on ice that was starting to crack. I could hear the warning sounds, but couldn't tell which direction to step. What kind of something else? I don't know yet. That's what I'm trying to figure out. She kissed my forehead, the kind of kiss you give a child or a relative, and headed upstairs. I heard the shower start a few minutes later. I spent the evening working on a side project, a database optimization tool I'd been developing for small businesses. The work required enough concentration to quiet the uneasy feeling that had been growing in my chest over the past few weeks. Around midnight, I headed upstairs. Nola was already asleep, or pretending to be. Her phone lay face down on the nightstand, which was new. She used to leave it face up, screen visible. Small changes, but I'd learned to pay attention to small changes. In my line of work, minor alterations in code often indicated larger systemic problems. I brushed my teeth and got into bed, careful not to disturb her. She shifted slightly when the mattress moved, but didn't wake up. The next morning, she was gone before I got up. A note on the kitchen counter explained she'd taken an early class before work. The note was signed with her initial rather than love or XOXO or any of the small affections that had been part of our routine for 8 years of marriage. I made coffee and checked my work email. 3 new project requests had come in overnight, including one from a law firm that needed their client database restructured. The work would be complex but well-paying, exactly the kind of challenge I enjoyed. My phone buzzed with a text from Ayla Derrick, my colleague at the consulting firm where I worked 3 days a week. Coffee before the Morrison meeting? I have intel about their security requirements. Ayla was 31, sharp, and one of the few people at work who appreciated my particular brand of dry humor. She'd joined the company 6 months ago after leaving a larger firm downtown, bringing with her an impressive client list and a no-nonsense approach to project management. Intel sounds ominous, I texted back. Meet at the usual place? See you at 9. The usual place was a coffee shop called Grind, located halfway between my house and the office. Ayla was already there when I arrived, laptop open, working through what appeared to be a complex spreadsheet. Please tell me the Morrison project isn't as complicated as that looks, I said, sliding into the seat across from her. Worse. They want a complete overhaul of their customer management system, but they also want to maintain compatibility with software that was last updated during the Clinton administration. Which Clinton? Exactly. She closed the laptop and smiled. But I think we can make it work. The real question is whether you want to take on something this involved. Depends on the timeline and the budget. 6 months, and they're willing to pay premium rates for the right team. I considered it. A 6-month project would mean steady income and interesting work. It would also mean longer hours and more time away from home. A few months ago, that would have felt like a sacrifice. Now, it felt like a refuge. I'm interested. Good, because I already told them you were the best systems architect I knew. Flattery will get you everywhere. I'm counting on it. We spent the next hour reviewing the technical requirements and mapping out a preliminary timeline. Ayla had a talent for breaking complex problems into manageable pieces, and her questions helped me identify potential issues before they became expensive mistakes. One more thing, she said as we packed up to leave. Completely unrelated to work. Shoot. My neighbor's having a party this Saturday. Nothing fancy, just good food and better wine. You and Nola should come. The invitation caught me off guard. Ayla and I had maintained a strictly professional relationship, despite the easy chemistry that made our work collaboration so effective. That's nice of you to offer. But? No but. I'll ask Nola and let you know. Fair enough. Though between you and me, you look like you could use a night out. She wasn't wrong. When was the last time Nola and I had gone to a party together? Or anywhere together, for that matter, that wasn't related to her fitness routine or my work obligations? I'll talk to her tonight, I said. Sounds good. And Rowan, the invitation stands either way. I wasn't sure what she meant by that, but before I could ask, she was gone. walking toward her car with the confident stride of someone who knew exactly where she was going. That evening, I mentioned Ayla's party invitation over dinner. Nola was actually home at a reasonable hour, having skipped her usual Wednesday class for a work deadline. This Saturday? She frowned, checking her phone calendar. I think Linda and I were going to try that new hot yoga class. It's a party, Nola. When's the last time we went to a party together? I don't really know this Ayla person. You could get to know her. She's smart, funny. I think you'd like her. What's she like? The question felt loaded somehow. Professional, good at her job, easy to work with. Is she married? Divorced, I think. Why? Nola shrugged. Just curious about what kind of party it'll be. The kind with food and conversation, maybe some music. Sounds very exciting, she said, but her tone suggested the opposite. We don't have to go. No, it's fine. I'll cancel with Linda. But even as she agreed, I could see her mentally calculating escape routes. The enthusiasm of someone looking forward to a social evening was notably absent. Saturday arrived gray and drizzly, the kind of weather that made staying home feel like the obvious choice. Nola spent most of the day at the gym, returning just 2 hours before the party with barely enough time to shower and change. What's the dress code for this thing? She called from the bedroom. Casual. It's just neighbors and coworkers. She emerged wearing jeans and a sweater that managed to look both comfortable and elegant. Even when she wasn't trying, Nola had a natural grace that made other women notice her with a mixture of admiration and envy. You look great, I said. Thanks. She checked her reflection in the hallway mirror. Do we know how long these things usually last? We can leave whenever you want. The party was in full swing when we arrived. Ayla's neighbor lived in a renovated warehouse downtown, the kind of space with exposed brick walls and oversized windows that attracted young professionals and creative types. Music played at a volume that encouraged conversation rather than shouting, and the crowd looked like a mixture of tech workers, artists, and people who defied easy categorization. Ayla spotted us immediately and came over with drinks. Rowan, and you must be Nola. She extended her hand with a warm smile. I've heard so much about you. Nice to meet you, Nola replied, though her handshake was brief. What can I get you to drink? There's wine, beer, and Marcus is making some kind of cocktail that involves far too many ingredients. Wine sounds perfect, Nola said. As Ayla led us toward the kitchen, I noticed Nola taking inventory of the other guests. Her expression was politely neutral, but I could see her cataloging details. Ages, outfits, relationship dynamics. This is a nice space, I said to Ayla. Isn't it? Rachel's an interior designer. She's got an amazing eye for making industrial spaces feel warm. We spent the next hour mingling. Ayla introduced us to her friends, and the conversations were the kind of effortless mix of humor and substance that made time pass quickly. Nola participated politely, but seemed more like an observer than a participant. Around 9 o'clock, her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her all evening. Everything okay? I asked. Just Linda. She's sending me pictures from the yoga class I missed. She showed me her phone screen. The photos showed Linda and several other women in various poses, looking sweaty and accomplished. But what caught my attention was the timestamp on the messages. They'd been sent over the past 2 hours, which meant Linda's yoga class was happening right now, not earlier in the day as Nola had implied. Looks like fun, I said carefully. Yeah, I'm kind of wishing I'd gone instead. The comment stung more than it should have. We can leave if you're not enjoying yourself. No, it's fine. These are your people. I'm just not really in a party mood tonight. My people. As if she were visiting a foreign country where she didn't speak the language. I was about to suggest we head home when Ayla appeared with a plate of food. You have to try Rachel's famous spinach and artichoke dip, she said. It's basically crack in food form. That sounds dangerous, Nola said, but she took a small portion. So Nola, what do you do for work? Ayla asked. HR consulting, mostly policy development and conflict resolution. That must be interesting. Do you enjoy it? It pays the bills. Nola's tone was flat, though lately I've been thinking about making some changes. What kind of changes? I'm not sure yet. Maybe something more active. I've gotten really into fitness over the past few months. That's great. What kind of fitness? Cycling, mostly. There's this amazing studio downtown with incredible instructors. And there it was. Within 5 minutes of meeting someone new, the conversation had steered towards cycling class. I should try that, Ayla said. I've been looking for a good workout routine. You should. The community there is amazing, really supportive, really motivating. For the first time all evening, Nola sounded genuinely enthusiastic. She spent the next 10 minutes describing the various classes, the different instructors, and the transformative power of high-intensity cardio. There's this one instructor, Kai, who's just incredible, she said. He's got this way of pushing you past what you think you can do. I watched Ayla's face as Nola spoke. She was listening politely, but I could see her picking up on the same undercurrents that had been bothering me for weeks. He sounds inspiring, Ayla said. He really is. I mean, all the instructors are great, but Kai has this energy that's just infectious. My phone buzzed with a work email, giving me an excuse to step away from the conversation. I found a quiet corner and pretended to read while actually observing my wife talk about another man with more passion than she'd shown for anything involving me in months. When I returned, Nola was exchanging numbers with Ayla. I'm going to text you the studio information, she was saying. You should definitely try the Tuesday evening class. I will. Thanks for the recommendation. We left shortly after that. The drive home was quiet, except for the radio and the sound of Nola's fingers tapping against her phone screen. Did you have a good time? I asked. It was fine. Ayla seems nice. She is. I think you two could be friends. Maybe. Nola was still looking at her phone. Linda wants to know how the party was. What are you going to tell her? That it was exactly what I expected. I wasn't sure what that meant, but her tone discouraged follow-up questions. At home, Nola went straight upstairs, while I locked up and turned off the lights. By the time I got to the bedroom, she was already in bed with her back turned toward my side. Nola? Are you happy? The question hung in the air for a long moment. I'm trying to be, she said finally. That's not really an answer. It's the only answer I have right now. I got into bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to her breathing gradually slow into sleep, or the pretense of sleep. Something was shifting between us, something fundamental and probably irreversible. I could feel it in the way she held herself apart, in the careful distance she maintained even when we were in the same room. The question was whether I was going to fight for what we'd had, or start preparing for what came next. The discovery happened by accident, which is how most life-changing moments seem to occur. I was looking for my phone charger on Sunday morning when I noticed Nola's gym bag sitting open by the front door. She'd left for an early cycling class, and something about the way the bag was positioned made it clear she'd packed in a hurry. Inside, nestled between her water bottle and a spare towel, was a phone I'd never seen before. Not just any phone. A newer model than the one she carried openly, in a bright pink case that seemed deliberately chosen to look like a fitness accessory. I picked it up, telling myself I was just moving it so it wouldn't get damaged. The screen lit up at my touch, showing 17 unread messages and 4 missed calls, all from someone listed as K in the contacts. I should have put it down. Should have respected her privacy and waited for her to explain. Should have been the trusting husband who didn't snoop through his wife's secret communications. Instead, I opened the messages. Can't wait for our recovery session today. Last night was amazing. You're incredible. When are you going to tell him? I know this is complicated, but I can't stop thinking about you. The messages went back weeks. dozens of them, forming a narrative that made my stomach clench with recognition. The late nights, the extra classes, the new enthusiasm for fitness, the emotional distance at home. My wife was having an affair with her cycling instructor. I scrolled through more messages, each one adding another piece to a puzzle I'd been unconsciously assembling for months. Photos of post-workout smoothies, screenshots of motivational quotes, voice messages I couldn't bring myself to play. And then, near the bottom of the conversation thread, I found the message that made everything crystal clear. "You make me feel so alive, Kai. Like I'm 25 again. I never want this feeling to end." I sat down hard on the couch, still holding the phone. 25. The same age she'd been when we first met, when everything was possibility and passion and late-night conversations that lasted until sunrise. The front door opened, and Nola's voice called out, "Rowan, I'm home!" I quickly placed the phone back in her bag and walked to the kitchen, trying to arrange my face into something resembling normalcy. "How was class?" I asked. "Great. Really intense." She was glowing with the kind of satisfaction that I now understood had nothing to do with cardiovascular exercise. "You forgot something," I said, gesturing toward her bag. She followed my gaze and went pale. "Oh, right. Thanks." She grabbed the bag and headed upstairs, moving faster than someone who'd just finished an hour of high-intensity cycling should have been able to move. I heard the shower start, followed by the sound of muffled conversation. She was calling him back, probably explaining that her husband had been near her bag, probably strategizing about how to be more careful. I made coffee and tried to think clearly. The smart thing would be to confront her directly, to lay out what I'd discovered and demand an explanation. The mature thing would be to suggest marriage counseling, to approach this as a problem we could solve together. But I wasn't feeling particularly smart or mature. Instead, I found myself thinking about the way she'd described me to her friends over the past few months. The complaints about routine, about feeling old, about needing something more exciting. I'd internalized those criticisms, had started to see myself through her eyes as boring, predictable, safe. Now I understood that safety hadn't been the problem. I had been the problem. Or rather, the fact that I wasn't a 27-year-old fitness instructor named Kai had been the problem. When Nola came back downstairs, she was dressed in clothes I'd never seen before. A sundress that emphasized her figure, jewelry that caught the light, makeup applied with the kind of care usually reserved for special occasions. "I'm meeting Linda for brunch," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "That sounds nice. We're going to that new place downtown, the one with the outdoor seating. Have fun." She kissed my cheek, another one of those distant, obligatory gestures, and left. I spent the rest of the day researching. Not Nola, not Kai, but divorce law, asset division, spousal support, the practical mechanics of untangling 8 years of shared life. The information was depressingly straightforward. In our state, adultery didn't significantly impact property division. We'd bought the house together, had joint bank accounts, had built a life that would need to be carefully dismantled regardless of who was at fault for its ending. But knowledge was power, and I was starting to think I'd need all the power I could get. That evening, Nola returned from her brunch with Linda around 6 o'clock, carrying shopping bags and wearing the satisfied expression of someone who'd had an excellent day. "How was brunch?" I asked. "Really good. We tried that new bottomless mimosa thing. Sounds dangerous. A little. But sometimes you need to do something dangerous to feel alive." The word choice felt deliberate. Alive. The same word she'd used in her text messages to Kai. "Did you and Linda talk about anything interesting?" "Just life stuff. Work, relationships, the future." "What about the future?" She paused, shopping bags still in her hands. "Just whether we're living the lives we actually want, or just the lives we think we're supposed to want." "And what did you conclude?" "That maybe it's never too late to make changes." The conversation felt like a rehearsal for a larger discussion that was coming soon. She was testing language, gauging my reactions, preparing for the moment when she'd need to explain why our marriage was ending. "Change can be good," I said carefully. "I think so too." She went upstairs to put away her purchases, and I heard her on the phone again. The conversation was brief and conducted in the low, intimate tone people use when they don't want to be overheard. Later that night, as we got ready for bed, I noticed she'd moved her gym bag to her side of the closet. The secret phone was probably hidden somewhere more secure now, somewhere a careless husband wouldn't accidentally discover it. "Nola? Yeah? Are you happy with us, with our marriage?" She stopped brushing her teeth and looked at me in the bathroom mirror. "Why do you ask?" "Because you seem different lately. Distant." "I'm not distant. I'm just figuring some things out." "What kind of things?" "Personal things. About who I am and what I want." "And you can't figure those things out while talking to me?" She rinsed her mouth and turned to face me directly. "Some things you have to figure out on your own, Rowan. Even when those things affect both of us?" "Especially then." She kissed my forehead and went to bed, leaving me standing in the bathroom with the growing certainty that my marriage was ending and I was the last person to know. But maybe, I thought as I brushed my own teeth, being the last to know didn't have to mean being powerless to act. Monday morning brought clarity in the form of righteous anger. I woke up before Nola, made coffee, and started planning. If my wife wanted to end our marriage for a younger man, that was her choice. But she didn't get to rewrite history, portray me as the villain, or leave me financially devastated while she rode off into the sunset with her fitness instructor. I started with what I knew. Kai worked at Velocity Cycling Studio downtown. A quick check of their website showed his schedule, classes Monday through Friday, with private training sessions available by appointment. Their Instagram account was a gold mine of information. Photos of instructors, class schedules, motivational quotes overlaid on images of attractive people in workout clothes. Kai appeared frequently, usually shirtless and grinning, surrounded by adoring students. He was handsome in that generic way that appeals to women going through midlife crises, all abs and enthusiasm, with the kind of confidence that comes from never having experienced real failure or responsibility. I screenshotted everything. Next, I checked our joint credit card statements. The pattern was immediately obvious once I knew what to look for. Charges at hotels downtown on days when Nola claimed to be at extended workout sessions. Payments to restaurants I'd never been to. A recurring monthly charge to something called Wellness Retreats LLC that had started 3 months ago. I printed everything. The phone records were trickier, but not impossible. Our family plan included detailed usage reports, and Nola's pattern of calls and texts showed a dramatic spike in activity over the past 2 months. Most of the increased communication happened during work hours and late evenings, when I was asleep or busy with projects. I created a spreadsheet. By the time Nola came downstairs for breakfast, I had assembled a comprehensive timeline of her affair. Dates, times, locations, expenses, everything documented and organized with the same attention to detail I brought to complex database projects. "You're up early," she said, pouring coffee. "Couldn't sleep. Decided to get some work done." "Anything interesting?" "Just organizing some data, looking for patterns." She glanced at my laptop screen, but I'd minimized the relevant windows. "Sounds thrilling. You'd be surprised how revealing patterns can be once you know how to look for them." Something in my tone made her pause, coffee cup halfway to her lips. "Everything okay, Rowan?" "Everything's fine. Just thinking about how much information people leave behind without realizing it." "What do you mean?" "Digital footprints, credit card records, phone logs, the way modern life creates this detailed record of everywhere you go and everything you do." She set down her coffee cup. "That sounds kind of invasive." only if you have something to hide. We looked at each other across the kitchen table, and I could see her calculating whether I was speaking generally or specifically. I should get ready for work, she said finally. Have a good day. Try not to leave too many digital footprints. After she left, I called in sick to my main job and spent the day conducting surveillance that would have made a private investigator proud. Velocity Cycling Studio was located in a trendy part of downtown, surrounded by juice bars and boutiques that catered to people with disposable income and flexible schedules. I parked across the street with a clear view of the entrance and waited. Nola's car arrived at 11:30, even though her calendar showed a client meeting at noon. She went inside carrying a small overnight bag that definitely hadn't been in her possession when she left for work that morning. Kai emerged from the studio at 11:45. Even from a distance, I could see why women found him appealing. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. They left together in his car, a red convertible that probably cost more than my annual salary. I followed at a distance, feeling ridiculous and determined in equal measure. They drove to the Meridian Hotel, a boutique place that advertised itself as a romantic getaway in the heart of the city. Kai handed his keys to the valet, while Nola waited by the entrance, checking her phone. I parked in the hotel garage and waited. They emerged 2 hours later, looking relaxed and satisfied in a way that made my chest tight with anger. I took photos of everything. That evening, Nola came home with an elaborate story about her client meeting running long and then stopping by the gym for a quick workout. "How was your day?" she asked, settling onto the couch with her laptop. "Productive. I made some interesting discoveries." "About the Morrison project?" "About patterns of behavior, how people think they're being subtle when they're actually being completely obvious." She looked up from her screen. "You're in a weird mood tonight." "Just thinking about honesty, how rare it's become." "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing specific, just general observations about human nature." I could see her trying to decide whether to push the conversation further. Curiosity warred with self-preservation, and self-preservation won. "I'm going to take a bath," she said. While she was upstairs, I uploaded the photos from my phone to a secure cloud storage account. Then I created a detailed summary of the day's events, complete with timestamps and locations. If Nola wanted to play games, I was going to make sure I won. The next morning brought a text from Ayla. "Coffee? I have updates on the Morrison timeline." We met at Grind, and I found myself studying her face as she talked through project details. She was attractive in a completely different way than Nola. Where my wife was all curves and carefully maintained glamour, Ayla had sharp angles and natural elegance. She wore minimal makeup and clothes that suggested competence rather than seduction. "You seem distracted," she said, closing her laptop. "Just thinking about relationships." "Work relationships or personal relationships?" "Personal. How people change. How they stop being who you thought they were." Ayla stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "Or maybe they stop pretending to be who they thought you wanted them to be." That's a depressing way to look at it. But probably accurate. Most relationships end because people finally start being honest about who they really are. What if honesty comes too late? Then at least you know where you stand. I found myself wanting to tell her everything. About the secret phone, the hotel receipts, the elaborate lies that had become my wife's daily routine. But that felt like crossing a line I wasn't ready to cross yet. "Hypothetically," I said instead, "if someone discovered their spouse was having an affair, what would you recommend?" Ayla raised an eyebrow. "Hypothetically?" "Completely hypothetical." "Well, hypothetically, I'd say that person has 3 choices. Confront the spouse and try to save the marriage. Pretend they don't know and hope it burns out naturally. Or start planning their exit strategy. Which would you choose?" "Depends on whether I thought the marriage was worth saving." "And how would you make that determination?" by asking whether the person I married still existed, or whether they'd been replaced by someone I didn't recognize. The question hit closer to home than I'd expected. When was the last time I'd seen the woman I'd fallen in love with? The one who laughed at my jokes, who stayed up late talking about everything and nothing, who made me feel like the most interesting person in the world? Hypothetically, I said, what would an exit strategy look like? Documentation, evidence, financial preparation, and most importantly, emotional preparation for the fact that the life you thought you had was already over. We finished our coffee in comfortable silence, and I realized that Ayla had given me permission to stop fighting for something that no longer existed. That afternoon, I opened a separate bank account and transferred half of our savings. If Nola wanted a war, I was going to make sure I had ammunition. The moment of truth came on Thursday evening, delivered with all the subtlety of a cycling class playlist. Nola had been unusually attentive all week, as if some part of her suspected eye was onto her game. She'd made dinner twice, initiated conversations about weekend plans, and even suggested we watch a movie together. But she'd also been sloppy. The secret phone had buzzed during dinner on Tuesday, and she'd jumped to answer it with an excuse about work emergencies. On Wednesday, she'd come home wearing different perfume than she'd left with that morning. Tonight, she was trying too hard. I was thinking we could go away this weekend, she said, curling up next to me on the couch. Maybe that bed and breakfast in the mountains you mentioned last year? That sounds nice, I said, not looking away from my laptop. But don't you have classes this weekend? I could skip them. We haven't spent quality time together in ages. The sudden interest in quality time felt like a guilty conscience making noise. What brought this on? Can't a wife want to spend time with her husband? She can. It's just been a while since this particular wife expressed that particular want. Nola pulled back slightly. That's not fair, isn't it? I've been busy, but that doesn't mean I don't care about us. Busy with what, exactly? The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire that was about to spread. With work, with trying to stay healthy, with figuring out who I am. And have you figured it out? Some of it. Care to share? She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her wrestling with whether to tell me the truth or continue the elaborate performance. I think I need some space, she said finally. What kind of space? Time to think, to figure out what I want. Without me. It's not about you, Rowan. Isn't it, though? You said I make you feel old, that I represent routine and predictability, that you need something that makes you feel alive again. Her face went pale. When did I say that? You've been saying it for months, maybe not in those exact words, but the message has been pretty clear. I never meant to make you feel what? Unwanted? Inadequate? Like I was holding you back from your true potential? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean, Nola? She stood up and walked to the window, putting physical distance between us. I meant that I'm not happy, that I haven't been happy for a long time, that I feel like I'm sleepwalking through my life. And you think the solution is to have an affair with your cycling instructor? The words came out before I could stop them. Nola spun around, her face a mixture of shock and panic. What are you talking about? I'm talking about Kai. I'm talking about the secret phone in your gym bag. I'm talking about the hotel charges on our credit card and the lies about where you've been spending your time. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I could see her cycling through possible responses. Denial, anger, justification, deflection. How long have you known? She asked finally. Long enough. Have you been spying on me? I've been paying attention, there's a difference. She sat down heavily in the chair across from me, no longer bothering to maintain the pretense. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? I don't know. I didn't plan any of this. You didn't plan to have an affair, or you didn't plan to get caught? I didn't plan to fall for someone else. The honesty was brutal and somehow refreshing after months of careful lies. Tell me about him. Rowan, tell me what he gives you that I don't. She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see her deciding whether to be cruel or kind. He makes me feel young, she said quietly. He makes me feel beautiful and exciting and full of possibility. And I make you feel old. You make me feel safe, comfortable, like everything is already decided. Those used to be good things. They were. They are. But lately, I've needed something else. And you couldn't talk to me about that? How do you tell someone that loving them feels like giving up? The question hit me like a physical blow. I'd been prepared for anger, for defensiveness, for elaborate justifications. I hadn't been prepared for honesty that cut this deep. So what happens now? I asked. I don't know. Yes, you do. You've been planning this conversation for weeks. She was quiet for a moment, then nodded. I want a separation. Time to figure out what I really want. You mean time to see if your boyfriend can offer you something more permanent than hotel rooms and secret phones? It's not like that. What's it like then? It's complicated. No, Nola. It's actually very simple. You chose someone else. Everything after that is just details. I closed my laptop and stood up. Where are you going? To pack some things. It sounds like one of us needs to move out, and it might as well be me. Rowan, wait. We should talk about this more. What's left to talk about? You're in love with someone else. You want a separation. You've made your choice. But we have 8 years together. That has to count for something. It does count. It counts as 8 years that apparently weren't enough to keep you from looking elsewhere. I headed toward the stairs, then stopped. One question. Okay. When you told him I make you feel old, what did he say? She flinched. How did you... I read the messages, Nola, all of them. He said I deserved to feel alive. And you believed him? Yes. Well, congratulations. You're about to find out what feeling alive really costs. I went upstairs and packed a bag, listening to her make phone calls in the kitchen below. Probably calling Kai, probably calling Linda, probably assembling her support network for the difficult days ahead. When I came back downstairs, she was sitting at the kitchen table with red eyes and a tissue box. I never wanted to hurt you, she said. But you did it anyway. I know, I'm sorry. No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry it's messy. But you're not sorry you did it. She didn't deny it. I picked up my bag and headed for the door. Rowan? Yeah? Where will you go? I'll figure it out. Will you call me so we can work out the details? My lawyer will call your lawyer. You already have a lawyer? I've been paying attention, remember? Patterns of behavior, digital footprints, exit strategies. I left her sitting at the table, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe clearly. The war was just beginning, but at least now we both knew we were fighting. I checked into a hotel that night, but by Friday morning, I'd found a furnished apartment downtown, walking distance from my office and most of the places that mattered. The lease was month to month, the rent was reasonable, and the space was mine. For the first time in years, I could arrange furniture the way I wanted it, eat dinner when I was hungry instead of when it was convenient, and work late without feeling guilty about neglecting someone who was probably texting another man anyway. The freedom was intoxicating. I called Ayla Friday afternoon. How's the Morrison project coming along? She asked. Good, but I was actually calling about something else. Oh? That party invitation you mentioned, does it still stand? Are we talking about a hypothetical party or an actual party? Actual. Tomorrow night. Rachel's having people over for a barbecue. I'd like that. There was a pause. Just you? Just me. Can I ask what happened to the marriage you were hypothetically worried about? It turns out it was already over. I was just the last one to get the memo. I'm sorry. Don't be. Turns out honesty is liberating, even when it hurts. Well, in that case, I'll pick you up at 7. Saturday evening arrived warm and clear, the kind of night that made outdoor parties feel like celebrations of possibility rather than social obligations. I'd spent the day setting up my new apartment and felt more relaxed than I had in months. Ayla arrived at exactly 7, wearing a sundress that managed to be both casual and elegant. She looked like someone who was comfortable in her own skin, who didn't need external validation to feel worthwhile. "Nice place," she said, glancing around the apartment. "It's temporary, but it works." Sometimes temporary is exactly what you need. The party was smaller than the previous weekend's gathering, maybe 20 people spread across Rachel's backyard and patio. The conversation was easy, the food was excellent, and nobody asked uncomfortable questions about my recent living situation changes. I found myself relaxing in a way that had become foreign over the past few months. When someone told a joke, I laughed, without calculating whether my response was appropriate. When the conversation turned to work projects, I participated without worrying about boring anyone with technical details. "You seem different tonight," Ayla said during a quiet moment between conversations. "Different how?" "Lighter, like you're not carrying something heavy anymore." "Maybe I'm not." "Want to talk about it?" "Not particularly, but I appreciate you asking." "Fair enough." We spent the evening talking to Rachel's friends, most of whom were interesting people with actual opinions about things that mattered. The conversations ranged from local politics to travel recommendations to the relative merits of different coffee brewing methods. Nobody mentioned cycling classes or fitness instructors or the transformative power of feeling young again. Around 10 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text from Nola. "Can we talk? I think I made a mistake." I showed the message to Ayla. "Timing," she said. "What do you think she wants?" "Probably to test whether her backup plan is still available." "Backup plan?" "You. Safe, reliable, financially stable you, in case the cycling instructor doesn't work out long term." The assessment was probably accurate and definitely unflattering. Should I respond? "That depends. Do you want to be someone's backup plan?" "Not particularly." "Then I'd say your phone is broken and you can't receive messages tonight." I turned off my phone and put it in my pocket. Problem solved. We left the party around 11 and walked slowly back to my apartment, taking the long route through downtown. The streets were busy with Saturday night energy, and the warm air made everything feel full of potential. "Thank you for tonight," I said when we reached my building. "Thank you for coming. It's nice to see you happy." I'm not sure happy is the right word yet, but I'm definitely not miserable anymore. That's progress. We stood there for a moment, and I found myself noticing things about Ayla that I'd been professionally ignoring for months. The way she smiled with her entire face, the intelligence in her eyes, the fact that talking to her felt effortless in a way that conversation with Nola hadn't for years. "Would you like to come up for coffee?" I asked. "Is that really what you're asking?" "I'm asking if you'd like to spend more time together. Tonight. Without the pretense of work projects or social obligations." "And what would that look like?" "Honest conversation. Maybe some wine instead of coffee. Seeing what happens when we stop pretending this is purely professional." She considered this. "Are you ready for that? Given everything that's happening with your marriage?" "My marriage ended months ago. I was just too stubborn to admit it." "And now?" "Now I'm interested in starting something new with someone who makes me feel like the best version of myself." That's a nice thing to say. It's a true thing to say. She smiled. "In that case, I'd love some wine." We went upstairs to my temporary apartment, and I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. It felt like the right time to stop saving things for someday and start appreciating what was happening right now. We talked until almost 2 in the morning, covering everything from childhood stories to career ambitions to the books that had shaped our worldviews. The conversation had the easy intimacy of people who were genuinely curious about each other. "I should probably head home," Ayla said eventually. "You should, but I don't want you to." That's good to know. Is it? It means I'm not imagining this connection. You're definitely not imagining it. She stood up and gathered her purse. I had a wonderful time tonight. So did I. And Rowan? For what it's worth, I think your wife is an idiot. Why's that? Because she had something real and threw it away for something shiny. That's always a mistake. She kissed my cheek and left, and I spent the rest of the night thinking about the difference between feeling old and feeling mature, between being safe and being boring, between settling for comfort and choosing contentment. Sunday morning brought 17 missed calls and 12 text messages from Nola, each one more desperate than the last. Please call me. We need to talk. I think I made a terrible mistake. Kai isn't who I thought he was. I miss you. I miss us. I deleted them all without responding. Some conversations were worth having, and some weren't. After 8 years of marriage, I'd finally learned the difference. Instead, I texted Ayla, "Thank you for last night. Would you like to have dinner this week? Somewhere public? Somewhere we can talk without pretending it's about work." Her response came back immediately. I'd love that. For the first time in months, I was looking forward to something. And for the first time in years, that something had nothing to do with my wife's schedule, preferences, or emotional availability. It felt like waking up after a very long sleep. The apartment was quiet, but it was the good kind of quiet. The kind that suggested possibility rather than emptiness. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and started planning the rest of my life. It was going to be different from what I'd expected, but different didn't necessarily mean worse. Sometimes different just meant better.